We're on the air, right? Ah, all the millions that can see us now. I'm Joe Klein. Where I guess I'm doing this. So we are going to discuss starting a state party, or what does it take? You want to become the founder of the somebody come up with a state. you want to you want to become the founder of the Guam Pirate Party. And Guam might be bad.
Utah, like Jamie said.
Utah?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Well, all right. Let's use Utah. Utah is a good enough place. I think we've been contacted by at least one person who's interested in Utah. So what, my favorite way to start this is just to, if I can do this. I'm so slick at this right now. I just have no idea what I'm doing. Okay.
We're the party of the internet.
I usually go to Ballotpedia. And we'll go look at Ballotpedia. Does that work? Can you see my screen?
Perfect.
Yeah. All right. So, well, you can look at Utah. It'll tell us all kinds of things about Utah. Okay. So this is like, it's very interesting to go look at your own state, because each state has, basically the federal system makes it so we have a different election system for every state and territory and the District of Columbia and the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, so it's like we have all this variety of things and they all function slightly differently. And it is up the state, even though the federal government sets who can vote in terms of age, and they're, saying everybody who is over 18 can vote if they're a citizen of the United States. But it is the state that runs the elections. So they actually have quite a bit of control over the elections. The state legislatures are the ones that choose the districts that the state will be divided up in, although some states actually have independent commissions. Classically, the legislatures do that, and that's how you get gerrymandering, because if it's controlled by the Democrats, they tend to draw the lines around the districts. So it enhances the ability to have a Democratic majority in the lower house of the state. And most states have an upper and lower house. In fact, states have a lot of latitude in their constitution. A state could have a constitution that has a different form of legislature. The only thing in the Constitution, the federal Constitution, that defines what kind of government you will have in a state is it specifies that it must be a Republican form of government. In other words, it has to be a republic. So the state of Utah cannot put up a king and be a member of the United States. I think the only state which potentially could do a king or a queen would be Hawaii, because they actually have a royal family. But let's, enough of that stuff. I digress. I'll probably digress multiple times. All right. So on Ballotpedia, they have things about the elections, including like what the elections are, how FAQs on things like mail-in voting and results certification, disputing transactions. And I'm trying to remember. See, I'm really bad at this. Anyway, so this and a couple of other sites will actually tell you what it takes to get on the ballot. Now, the first thing you want to think about, you're going to start a party, right? So you're going to say, well, all right, we're going to need a treasurer. Why do you need a treasurer? Because usually the state is going to demand is going to have something. Some states refer to them as election commissions, or sometimes you just go through the Secretary of State. But there's some organization in the state where when you run for office, you have to put a little piece of paper out and say, I want to run for office. And then you have to go find people that are going to sign that piece of paper and endorse you for office. And the number of people depends on what state you're in, depends on what office you're running for. And I'm almost have to say, depends on the time of day. There's so many variables that it's utterly ridiculous. So, but you got to look that stuff up. You want to start a party? First thing you got to understand is how the political system works. And every state, it's different. There's not a uniform method of electing people in the United States. Again, I said they're all run by the states. So the number of signatures can depend on the district. Like in Illinois, they base it on the last turnout, I think, in the presidential primary. I'm sorry, I should remember that. But there's a certain percentage. Some places use percentages, some have absolute numbers. Like in Wisconsin, it's 2,000 signatures can get you on the ballot for the governor, the county executive in the largest county in the state, which is Milwaukee County. And 2,000 signatures can get you on the ballot for senator or congressman. No, Congress is smaller. Congress is like 800 or something. But senator would be 2,000. Basically, anything that's a statewide ballot thing, it's 2,000 signatures. And that's changed from state to state. So if you look at this ballot access ballots, this is in Ballotpedia again. Election policy. And these are the things you're going to have to learn how to deal with, because it's how each election is run is totally different. And indeed, if you're just concentrating on like county or municipal or parish, if you're in Louisiana, then you're going to have to learn what those are, and they may be totally different. In Wisconsin, it's totally different if you're in Milwaukee County as opposed to the other counties. They just don't like Milwaukee in Wisconsin, so they have special rules. It has nothing to do with the population being, largely black in the state. I had nothing to do with that, but it does have to do with they don't like large cities. And the same thing, like Illinois doesn't like Chicago. I swear every state, they skew their political system against the large cities. You'd think that would change over time. It doesn't seem to. All right, ballot access. So there are regulations on how to access the ballot. As you see this here, refers to the rules and regulations determining which candidate and parties may appear on voters' ballot. Rules for ballot access are complex and state-specific. Ballotpedia is not mincing words here. Generally, a candidate may run as a nominee of a political party as an independent candidate or a write-in candidate. And even then, they put rules on it. For example, some states say that if you're running as a write-in candidate, you have to declare that you're a candidate for them to count the write-in votes. Funny thing is, I looked at I did an analysis of elections in the city of Milwaukee, and that went back to when they had paper tabulation, and they would write down everything. You could go back to the 1950 and you could see how many people voted for Mickey Mouse or Daffy Duck. They would actually tabulate all that stuff. So you could also tell how many people voted for some small third party, which is actually interesting because looking at things like that gives you an idea of how many people are dissatisfied with the political system. Because the people that are satisfied are going to vote for a Republican or a Democrat, right? Normally, because they're satisfied. Or they at least are satisfied enough to vote for somebody, the lesser of the two evils. So,
if I might interject.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the best indicator of the number of people who are dissatisfied is simply take the total number of voters and subtract anyone who voted for the Democrat and Republican, and that's the number of dissatisfied people.
Yeah.
Like so many people simply don't vote because
they a lot of people don't
the Democrats or Republicans as acting in their interests.
Yeah, and you don't even know why they don't vote. You don't know if it's apathy or they don't like the system or they don't feel empowered. There's lots of reasons people don't vote or even don't get involved. There has been one of the things that the Black Lives Matters movement has done is a lot of people who march in those things become more involved in the political system because they feel they have a duty to be involved. They have a desire to change the system. And if you're apathetic, of course, you may go like, well, it doesn't matter if I vote, which is kind of funny in this, the way the system is right now. It's so close between the center left and the center right party, if you want to call them that, or the center party, whatever. It's so close between those two parties that in some cases it is less than 0.5% in a district can actually change the outcome of the election. So you know, people are close to having a lot of power. And if you had a three-party system or in a multi-party system, the thing is that in parliamentary systems, it might be the third party that allows them to put together the government. And that third party might find itself in an interesting position of brokering power. I think there's a bunch of ways we can improve the way America runs its elections. But I was going to go on, and getting in on the ballot is difficult. So, and they give you terms here, like what's a primary election? What's an open primary? What's a closed primary? A primary election, you know, if I got multiple people running for office on a ticket, and in a lot of states, the tickets are defined by the party system. Pardon me. I'm going to have to get some water or something. But in a lot of states, it's defined by the party system. And you declare, I'm going to run as a Democrat. And if there are 5 Democrats running, then you have a runoff, or that's a primary. And in an open primary, anybody can vote for either the Democrat or the Republican or the Independent. It doesn't matter. You don't have to declare your party when you go vote. In a closed primary system, you have to declare what party you belong to, and you can only vote on the primary ballot for the party that you're declared for. And of course, there's some states that do other things. We have the semi-closed primaries, top two primaries. Anyways, so, and if you look at, like, here are the open primaries. I grew up in Wisconsin, and I am familiar with the open primary in Wisconsin. It's an interesting set of states. I have no idea why the southern states did this. So all right. So, and they give you details on each one of these. I think of the outliers right now, let's see. Is it Maine? Maine does some weird stuff with the presidential. And you also have to differentiate local politics and state politics, and the Congress and the Senate are completely different electoral systems than the presidential primary or the presidential race. And I think this is an important distinction, especially if you're trying to get a third party involved in politics in a state. You have to point that out to people, because you can't be a spoiler running for Congress. You can't be a spoiler to the presidential election running for Congress. You can't be a spoiler to the Senate election running for the Senate. I mean, to the presidential election. And the Democrats are particularly sensitive. It's like, well, if you run as a third party, you're going to spoil things. And they constantly bicker about how many votes the Greens took away from them in the 2000 election. So there's kind of a party discipline of saying, oh, it's evil to be part of a third party. And yet, if you look at the history of third parties in the United States, they're the ones that tend to bring new ideas to the plate, tend to create more reforms in the system. And indeed, that's the advantage of supporting a third party, is maybe we can come up with a better way to run our country, or a better way to run elections, or a better way to run cities. Okay. So they have the election governor. So we're looking at Utah here. And I have no idea what Utah's like. So here we learn a couple of things. A, they got online voter registration. They do elections by mail. And I suppose Republicans don't have any problems with that, because, of course, Utah tends to vote Republican. Gives the time of the tolls, whether you require identification. All right. And I'm trying to think. So they give you the rules for registration, the voting policy, and these things are all good to know, because you're going to have to, if you're trying to get on the ballot, you have to know what a voter is. You don't want people who can't vote signing your petition to be on the ballot. So,
if I can interject, I mean, I think it's, we're talking about forming a state party. So ultimately, if you want to organize your state, contact us. We can, we can walk you through figuring out what you need to do. In Massachusetts, I had been part of the Green Party, so I knew the procedure. And so I knew we needed to get 50 voters to basically sign and say, yes, I want this political designation created. And essentially, it was just a matter of going and finding 50 voters to do that, signing it, getting affidavits from their, from their city's town clerk or city election division, and find out that they are, in fact, voters at that address and get a printed thing. And then simply it's just a matter of bringing it to the Secretary of State's office. They stamp it, okay, now we're pirate, and we appear in the list of other political designations. But it's going to vary from state to state. I mean, in Massachusetts, you've got political designations, and then if you get a candidate who gets 3% in a statewide ballot, or you've then registered 1% of all voters in your political designation, then you're considered a party, and that has...
Then you get ballot status.
Right, you have ballot status, and that has certain advantages and disadvantages. Advantages, instead of being able to raise $500 per person, ballot qualified parties can raise $5,000 per person. At the same time, if we were to run candidates for governor, for example, we could run a slate of candidates for a variety of positions at the same time on the same nomination paper. And instead of what the Democrats or Republicans, or whether the Greens or Libertarians get ballot status, they have a less time to gather signatures and for those offices, and they can only gather signatures on one sheet for the gubernatorial candidate or the state auditor or whatever. Whereas theoretically, if we wanted to, we could put out a slate of candidates and then have them all, have them on one nomination paper, which, having had to when I ran in 2002, it's, would you sign for me? Would you sign for these two other people who I'm running with? And it's a lot of forms to deal with when you're trying to get 5 or 10,000 signatures. So,
yeah.
But
that doesn't sound like that many signatures, I guess.
5,000?
No, 5,000 is a lot.
Yeah, but it's 150 for a state rep. It's 300 for a state senator. It's 2,000, which is pretty high as U.S. House seats go.
Yeah, that's way high. Wisconsin,
yeah.
Wisconsin 2,000 can get you into anything.
Yeah, if only. Our ballot access laws are not the best in Massachusetts, but
they're bad all over the place. And they differ from state to state. That's really the bizarre thing. I mean, I don't even know how we could go in detail about, but I think it would be advantageous if we had movements that were trying to increase ballot access. But of course, the big parties don't want that for obvious reasons.
Right. To that point, if you ever look at the signature requirements, it's always, as you said earlier, significantly less if you're trying to run as a Democrat or Republican versus trying to get on the ballot for a third party. There's no greater bipartisanship than when the Democrats and Republicans are trying to keep other options off the ballot.
Yep. I have told the story of when in 1910, the or 1911. Now I'm like losing my mind as to what date it is. Okay. But in Wisconsin, in Milwaukee, the Socialist Party swept all of the county seats and all the city seats in Milwaukee, basically. And then the state legislature made all of those positions in Milwaukee nonpartisan. And then in the following election, there was a person who ran for mayor who was run by both the Democrats and Republicans. So that was how they dealt with the Socialist Party winning the election. You can't say you're a socialist, and we're going to run a candidate backed by the two parties. So, yes, I mean, you don't underestimate how much the system likes to preserve the system. And that doesn't mean you should give up. It just means you have to go into it boldly understanding that you're going to ruffle some feathers trying to run or try to create another party. And your choices are, do you want to go along with the system the way it is? If you think the system's fundamentally corrupt in some ways, that's a hard thing to do. And one of the easiest ways to root out corruption in government is to give them some competition, or at least if you can get into debates. And I don't know about Jamie, but I ran for county executive twice in Milwaukee, and I got into the debates before the primary, and it was interesting because when you get into debates, you can bring things up, and it changes the nature of the discussion that the quote unquote leading candidates are having. Maybe they didn't want to discuss about youth unemployment in the central city of Milwaukee, but suddenly it's on the table, so they talk about it. So whatever your cause is, when you run for office, it gives you a bullhorn to discuss things. All right. And I assure you, on Ballotpedia, you can't go through this. There's a couple other sites, I can't even think where they are, that give you what you need to get on the ballot. Usually you can also go to your local, in some cases, your county. There's a website for your county election commission, and pardon me. And you can find you can usually find at your county there. You can find at your county a bunch of information like, how I get on the ballot, what kind of paperwork. And most of the paperwork is available as PDFs. You can print them on a regular printer. But you have to be careful, especially when you're collecting signatures, because there might be rules for who can pass around the paperwork for getting a signature. Like some places, they don't allow anybody to to solicit people to sign a petition. In some cases, you have to be a citizen of that area. You have to be over 18 or a qualified voter, or you can't do it if you're a felon. So there are rules everywhere, and they can get you on the rules. The rules really count if let's say you barely make it. Pardon me. Usually it's good to get like a couple of percentage, 5% over what you need as a minimum to get in, so that you can have disqualified petitions. Because if they don't want you to be on a ballot, somebody's going to go through every one of the petitions and go like, oh, well, this, you can't tell if this is a legal signature, or does this person really live there? Or are two of these signed by the same person? They could dispute every line in your petition. And if you're within a couple of hundred or a couple of dozen of getting on the ballot, if they look hard enough and they're picky enough, they might be able to pick off the number required to disqualify you for ballot access.
I mean, I think the key thing from that is don't give them the opportunity.
Yeah, don't
Make
give them
sure
the
that you
opportunity.
have a good cushion. And I'll talk about this on Thursday with how to run for office. But make sure that you've got a good cushion so that they can't challenge. There just aren't enough signatures for them to challenge to knock you off. I mean, if I recall correctly, that happened with Obama when he was running for state senate. He got at least people who supported him got at least two candidates knocked off the ballot simply by challenging signatures. So don't give them the opportunity. Go out there, gather your signatures, gather extra, make sure they're valid voters, make sure your count, be on top of that. You're organized, you can get it done. That said, if you're running for like town meeting member in Massachusetts where you need to get 10 signatures, I mean, someone's going to challenge you over that. At least I hope.
I think there's always, you're going to have, in politics, you're going to create enemies. And if you create enemies, somebody's going to challenge you. It just happens. And I don't think you can do anything about that, except, as you said, try to do things so that it's impossible for them to easily disqualify you. Okay, so that, right? You're going to go into running for government. I won't go into all the qualifications again, for the individual to get on the ballot. That, again, does change from state to state. And just like who can vote changes from state to state. But fundamentally, in the state, there's probably some kind of commission or the Secretary of State or somebody is in charge of saying, well, you're on the ballot or you're not on the ballot. And that office is going to become your friend if you're starting a political party. You got to go deal with them and you got to talk to them. And you go in, and most of the people that work in those positions, I don't know about Jamie, but I've always found them to be extremely nice, extremely, very willing to talk to you about what is required, what you need to do, and if there are any problems, they'll point them out to you. So you can actually learn a lot just going in and talking to the people that work at, pardon me, say the election commission. I should have taken a decongestant beforehand. It's high allergy season here. I don't know about you.
We also have a lot of rain, so of late, the last few days.
That's called spring, I think is.
We don't have spring. We go from winter to summer.
Well, we thought we did that, and then it got cold again.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the other part is this whole thing with paperwork. Now, if you're running for a federal office, you're going to be worried about the Federal Election Commission, and you're going to have to read their instructions, and you have to comply with federal law in how you raise money and who you solicit things from, or how you do it, or how you advertise. In some cases, there are rules. For example, a radio station treats you different if you're a candidate than if you're a private citizen talking. Because if you're a candidate, you can actually, some of the FCC rules regarding what you can say on the air don't apply to you because it's now political speech. I know that because I worked at a low power radio station and actually ran a show for a while. So I'm not trying to say it's complex, but there's a lot of little subtle things that it's going to take you a while to learn. If you set up a party, you're going to have to learn how it works in your state or your municipality or your county or wherever you're running candidates, because that it's highly individual in this country. We don't have a federal system.
Even if you're not running candidates, if you're trying to start a party in your state in the future, maybe you do wish to run candidates. I think that, like you're saying, it is important to look at the state rules and the legislation and what you need to do for future reference. But just to have representation in the Pirate Party and starting a state level party, I feel is something that, people should know that we as the United States Pirate Party will look out for you. We know that we are, as we've said in the past meetings, we're essentially 50 countries operating under a gigantic banner. The continental United States is the size of continental Europe. We're a very large country with a lot of jurisdiction. If you are looking to start a state party, we will help you. If any questions, the United States Pirate Party will help locally.
Well, as best as we can.
Right, as best as we can.
And and the other, really important things are things like there are limitations of what you can do as a political party. You can't, for example, I was trying to think of here something that's obvious. You can't take money from foreign people. You can't take monies from corporations.
Well, legally. I believe there are various candidates in past elections who did. I believe they might have been Republicans at that, but
I'm sure you could find Democrats that did that too.
Well,
might even find
both sides breaking the rules. No,
I mean, there's a lot of dark money. There's a lot of super PAC money, and who knows where that comes from. You could be a rich billionaire, give money to a 501c3 who gives it to another 501c3 who gives it to a 501c4 who gives it to a super PAC.
Right.
And all of that is hidden, right? We don't know.
But you can't,
government could come from Russia,
Yeah.
Potentially.
All right. I would argue, and I'm arguing, that it's important that you try to comply with the spirit of the law, not just,
Agreed.
And that you don't give them a chance to find a way to say, you can't run. Your party is illegal. You've done bad things. So you kind of have to be better. I think as a third party, as you're new on the scene, you have to be better than they are. And being better than they are might be, let's make sure we're more scrupulous. Let's if there's financial reporting to do it, you're going to do the financial reporting. If there are ways to certify petitions that you have to go through, then you make sure you go through them and you make sure you comply with the rules. It's all pretty simple stuff. It's like read the rules and then do things according to the rules. And they vary from place to place, but there is a set of rules. And it's written by the legislature of whatever entity of government that you're running for. I probably said that weirdly. You'll find a law somewhere. In most places, they let you at least read the law. Although some places they charge you for it. All right. Do we have any questions? Oh, yes, we should talk more about the party, state party. So I would argue that, look, if you're recognized by the, will we do any endorsement for candidates? I think if you're a state party, yeah, you would endorse candidates. I don't know that that's up to that's up to the membership. Have we ever endorsed anybody? I don't think we've ever. Well, we did endorse Barack Obama in the first time he ran for office.
I actually mentioned that in yesterday's meeting that the Pirate Party had initially endorsed Obama and withdrew the reversal upon, you know, the whole revelation of the spying and the Snowden and, you know, Patriot Act and all that, which I complimented the Pirate Party for sticking true to the roots of us protecting transparency and privacy, and, you know, acknowledging our mistake and withdrawing it. And I thought that was very responsible at a at the federal for a political party to do, to say we made a mistake, like, you know, and take it back. And I don't believe we've endorsed a federal candidate since at the presidential level.
No, I think there's been a reluctance to do that because of that particular incident. And that was more from, you know, I think a lot of people genuinely thought that a guy who lectured on the Constitution and taught constitutional law would actually comply more with the Constitution than I think we felt he did in terms of utilizing things like, you know, drones over neutral countries, a couple other things that we felt he was violating some of the basic tenets of American law and of the Constitution. And the reason I bring up the drones is because we killed at least 2 American citizens in a third country, in a neutral country, one that was not where we were not engaged in combat, using drones. And of course, that means the executive power of the United States was used to say, you are a terrorist and we're going to kill you. And there was no trial and there was no due process. It was just a Hellfire missile dropped on their car, which, as far as I know, is not comply with the rule of law.
I mean, in some ways, the National Party should really focus on nationwide offices and leave it to the state parties who they want to nominate, ideally nominate or endorse, and what their rules are. I mean, in Massachusetts, you know, we try to run our own candidates and we nominate our own candidates, but we do have allow ourselves the possibility that if they're, say, DSA or Libertarian or Green, that we may go and endorse them, especially if it's for a nonpartisan office like city council or something like that. And we've done that in the past.
Yeah, I mean, there's also another example is you may have your party, your local party might put a list of things that you would like to see done. And if one of the candidates that's running endorses all the things on your list, you can kind of do the sideways of endorsement of saying, well, this candidate has agrees with our party's position on A, B, and C, and D, which I guess is kind of like an endorsement. Have you ever done that, Jamie? Or, no. All right. We have loads of questions here. I can see nobody's asking questions. All right. So, how long do we want to take this on? I'm all for people asking questions. Okay. I would, and Jamie, what do you think of this? You know, if you're registered, look, you start a party, there's like levels of what a party is. You can, if you registered with your state system, whatever it is, and as you grow, then you might get ballot status. But it's all a matter of there are ways, there's a path, and the path involves registering things, making sure that people know that you're, you know, the state official, the election commission understands that you are a political party and that you're working with them in order to get on the ballot. So do I believe the private party policies could become more mainstream as issues with big tech grow? Anybody? I could say yes.
I think so. I think especially the need for freedom on access of information. As much as I think none of us here were fans of Donald Trump, I feel as though perhaps censorship from Facebook and Twitter, permanent ban, like maybe a ban like Trump can be viewed as necessary, but what a slippery slope that does lead to.
Yeah, and I also think, I mean, I will argue, I'm going to be the devil's advocate here and say that the problem with the Facebook ban or a Twitter ban is not, I think, less a question about freedom of speech as to how in the world did we allow this company to accumulate so much power that they can like turn somebody off or turn somebody on. The problem is the consolidation of power into a few media entities or social networking companies, or if whatever, or mail delivery company, you know, it could be anything where you take power and you only have, you've built this little pyramid and there are only a couple of people at the top that control elements of that are important to the function of society, then there's something wrong. That's a broken political system. Because whenever you acquire this large amount of power, if it's economic power, it's going to end up being political power. And that political power, you know, to kind of put it in old terms, that could become a conduit of a form of tyranny against the people of the country.
I mean, we had antitrust laws,
and we ignore them now.
Well, I mean, it started with Bork and Reagan, saying that and the Chicago neoliberals, thinking, you know, saying that that the only thing that matters is price, and if the prices go down, then customers don't have anything to complain about, and that's fine. But economic concentration in the hands of a small number of people is something that supposedly we knew about over 100 years ago. So I don't quite understand why we're learning that lesson now,
Yeah.
except that the rich don't want us to learn that lesson.
Well, they don't want us to learn that lesson. And if you get even if it's a group of companies, if they get enough of whatever industry they're in, they're going to control the prices. Look at something like OPEC. And when they control the prices, they're going to manipulate it so that they make a profit and it costs you money.
But in terms of social media, I mean, you talk about concentration, but also we've allowed these companies, used to be, 20, 30 years ago, the internet was more peer-to-peer than it is now. Now we've got people on AWS. If they don't like you, well, then you don't have access to, it's harder to put your servers up. You have Apple with locking down their apps and saying you can be in our store, you can't be in our store. We have the technologies, torrenting and a wide variety of other peer-to-peer technologies, Mastodon, where we can decentralize the internet the way it was originally designed to be. And yet we've allowed these corporations to kind of get in the way. So if people really if they're concerned about Facebook or Twitter limiting who can be heard, and they're private corporations, they're not bound by the First Amendment, then really we need to get serious about putting in technologies that really decentralize the web. But we have a couple of questions. Do you believe that the Pirate Party policies could become more mainstream as the issue with big tech grows?
No, I read that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Next. I believe that copyright discourages innovation and only creates a monopoly on products and ideas. Yes.
Yeah, well, that's the point of it, was to create a short-term monopoly for the individual. And what happened is, as companies got more powerful, they decided that they wanted it to be longer. So Mickey Mouse never dies, as long as he's running under the Walt Disney logo.
Yeah, I mean, Dr. O points out that trademark is that we haven't seen Disney try to extend it. So I think his supposition is the trademark is really they can let the original stuff go and people can copy it and share it, but it's hard to go and say, oh, I'm going to create something new with Mickey Mouse, because they've got that locked down under trademark.
Yeah.
But also, will we ever have demonstrations or interviews to spread the word about the cons of copyright laws? That would be a good series to have, actually.
I find it odd because I find there are a lot of people who you wouldn't expect who get really weird about copyright laws. Because, they go, well, how in the world, I got a relative who wrote a book and we all make money off of it. People get, the biggest thing against pushing that kind of stuff is there are a lot of people who make money off of it. And they're the ones who are going to oppose it. And it gets hard when people get money for something. It takes some real convincing to try to get them to change their mind. Look at things like slavery. It didn't matter how evil it was or how bad the practice was. People were making money off of it, and they didn't care.
Well, go on.
What? Go on.
I mean, they also changed their theology to make it seem like it was a good thing as well. Right? I mean, that's some retconning there. But anyways,
Well, people do the same thing with copyright and patents, right? Right? We would be far better off if we had some easy way to allow other, the government has funded the development of a vaccine, then the government should be able to give it away to anybody they want to. But the companies that receive the money are just like, no, you can't do that. You're going to cut into our revenues. Doesn't matter if it's good for the planet. The heck with the planet. Matters is the bottom line.
I mean, in terms of what I find interesting is people who are just budding writers. They haven't even necessarily published anything, and they're very beholden to, well, I need this copyright to protect me. And it's literally, obscurity is way more of an issue than piracy ever will be for most writers. And being able to get it out there so people see it is far more important. But still people kind of buy in, it's the neoliberal ideology that, I don't want taxes to be high on the rich because one day I could be rich. And it's like, yeah, but odds are you're not going to be. So what's going on there?
Well, and how rich are you going to be? You're going to be a Bezos rich, or you're just going to be like well off? A lot of especially because they don't. Most of these laws talking about taxation, or you're talking about people who make $1 million a year or more, or 400,000. I think was what Joe Biden said is their cutoff. And what is rich? I guess I don't. That's a weird discussion. I'm sorry, but. It's easy. It's easy to fall into doing things based on your immediate self-interest. What you think is, I've got to pay the bills at the end of the week. But then it's a little odd that you're against laws that have no effect on you. NFTs.
Non-fungible tokens. So an NFT is when you give the right, or you give ownership to a digital asset to someone for an exchange of money. Usually it's done through some blockchain technology such that they have proof that they are the ones who own it.
Isn't that done with games more than anything else?
No, I've seen it a lot with like JPEGs. I think even there were some like early Warhol. I saw this. There was some early Warhol. He got like the second Amiga, and he did some bitmap images that they managed to convert, get off a disk, convert, and upscale. And now they're trying to sell them, his museum or estate or something like that. And they're trying to sell them, I think, as NFTs.
But wouldn't that be called fungible then?
Right, yeah, non-fungible tokens, yeah.
Okay, all right, non-fungible.
But I mean, the digital representation, there's no, it's bragging rights. Like you're paying someone for bragging rights to say you own it and you control it, but really it's a digital asset, which means copying is virtually free. So I don't quite understand the whole point, but I mean,
you legally own it.
Yeah, you legally own it. I mean, that's. I mean, for me as a pirate, digital assets, if anything can be copied easily, that's what it should be, right? If the Library of Alexandria had been able to be copied, we would have, 90% of ancient, or 90%, we'd have 100% of ancient Greek works and 100% of ancient Roman works, and we'd still have those, but we don't have them because
Well, it would have been recoverable.
burned it, and this group burned it,
Yeah.
and that group burned it.
Civilization is more recoverable if you have multiple copies all over the place.
Right. And so I find it interesting that within the digital space, there are people who want to they want to take what is a digital common and enclose it. Right? It's either Facebook's trying to enclose it by enclosing your social graph, or Apple's trying to enclose what apps they allow, or someone's trying to enclose, money in the form of Bitcoin. I mean, it's all an enclosure. And as pirates, why the fuck would we support that?
So you're not a fan of Bitcoin?
Bitcoin, look, I think it's useful for the idea of being able to buy things anonymously. That's what cash is, except you can do it over the span of the earth. There's utility to that, but Bitcoin is gold, and it's gold that freaking devastates the planet. So what's the point of that? Why do we need to why is it the early adopters got to be, millionaires, but anyone who
gold is fine until we start asteroid mining. Then the bottom will drop out. I keep on saying that, but it's going to happen eventually if we don't destroy ourselves.
Well, let the robots do it. Space is harmful to people.
Well, I'm not arguing about how you extract it. I'm just saying that there are asteroids out there with more gold than has ever been mined on the planet Earth. That would not be good for the people holding on to gold coins if that was brought down.
But it takes a lot of money to A, find it, and B, mine it.
Yeah, mostly mine it or get it back.
Well, you got to prospect too, but you can let the bots do that.
Yep.
So I think we've kind of gone off topic of.
Oh, yeah, we were talking about
organizing state parties. So
state parties. Well, if you're a state party, you should have a chest full of gold, and then make sure you leave rum with it. And then send it to the national party. Okay.
Yeah, we got another question. Well, it's more a statement. I believe that people shouldn't be demonetized for having a clip of a music or movie in a YouTube video. I completely agree with you, but I think personally the ultimate way is for people to be using services like Patreon, that it's more important to get people who are willing to support you creating new art or new music or new whatever than it is to try and monetize the viewing that they're seeing. If we can if you can put your videos out for free, but you get people who are willing to give you money to create the new videos, I think that's a better model to do. But that's me.
Yeah, you're still going to pay for a concert, right?
Say that again?
You're still going to pay for a concert. Even if you could, even if there was no copyright on any of the music involved in the concert, you're still going to pay for the concert.
Right.
Okay. So, I think the generally reforming copyright and patent laws is probably the most difficult thing in the Pirate Party's platform. Not I'm just in terms of what it takes to understand it and how it works and some people have real problems with it. And that's a challenge. But I don't know, it's not as controversial as a bunch of other things. Certainly not as controversial as having a draft or abortion or, whether the War Powers Act is good or not. So you've got a whole bunch of things compared to the grand spectrum of politics. Copyright and patents are a relatively minor issue. Or am I wrong on that?
I mean, there is, like, I've seen, I remember Tech Dirt did a graph of someone had gone through and randomly selected all the book titles in Amazon, and for which ones were actually sold. And those that were no longer under copyright, you see that go up. And then there's a dive, and then the newer stuff starts to go up, and you start seeing those again. So there's this vast trough of works that just aren't shared and aren't really available. There's vast works from the early film age that are rotting. And those, in a sense, that is our history, and losing that is every bit as bad as losing the works we lost in the Library of, the Library of Alexandria, because those define to some degree who we were and what our past was. And certainly, nuclear war is more important, and that we're all under the thumb of the rich and who keep getting richer, and the rest of us keep getting poorer. But they freaking use copyright to make themselves richer and the rest of us poorer. So yeah, it's an issue.
I'm not saying it's not an issue. I'm just saying,
it's an
I'm just saying it's a difficult issue I don't know. We'll talk about that. We're going to defend what does it take to give the dialogue about I'm a pirate and you should be voting for us. Because that's part of the issue. And yeah, it still it costs money to make an album, but you're paying for the artwork, you're paying for the pressing, or the recording, or people's time. But why aren't you just paying for that and not paying for some large music industry to control, the copyrights on things? Musicians don't get that much. A lot of artists don't get much. It's not all going directly to the creators. And I think that's got to be part of the discussion too.
Absolutely.
So do I think donations are? Yeah. All right. So I think I was the one who did the hacked version of Uncle Sam pointing at people and going, you should start a state party or get involved in one. And you should. You might think it's difficult, but we have people which will gladly help you start a party. Help you start a party in your state and help you work to make that a successful party. And our biggest problem is we need more people, and we also need happy people, because it's too easy. You find that people who become activists in politics, it's too easy for you to burn out. And we need each other to work together and to work with each other to keep things going.
Many hands make light work.
Yes, many hands make light work. Do we know any other bad Chinese? No.
But I think, going forward, folks, if you're interested in starting a state party, just shoot us an email, info@uspirates.org, and we're happy to help.
You also, when you said running for office, you've put up some really good information on the wiki on running for office. And we should probably expand that in terms of starting parties. So everybody who watched, thank you very much. Thank you for participating or watching us or listening to our chatter. And share the video if you want to, because this is not copyrighted. Okay, how do we end this thing?
And make sure to check us out at US Pirate.